If you were around for the 2010 NFL season, chances are you remember the Beastquake. You probably remember Aaron Rodgers rising to the top. You might even recall Mark Sanchez beating both Peyton Manning and Tom Brady in back-to-back playoff games. But what you may forget is that the Seahawks won their division with a losing record, Tom Brady threw 36 touchdowns to just 4 interceptions to win MVP, and that Michael Vick returned to deliver one of the most electrifying comebacks in NFL history. 2010 didn't have one dominant narrative. It was scattered and a bit unpredictable. It was the kind of season where everything, from seeding to momentum, got thrown out the window once January started. And there was commotion off the field as well. The collective bargaining agreement was set to expire, and the threat of a lockout loomed. But on the field, the Patriots went 14-2 behind Tom Brady's unanimous MVP campaign, but they flamed out immediately in the playoffs, stunned at home by the 6-seed Jets. Arian Foster came out of nowhere to lead the NFL in rushing with 1,600 yards and 16 touchdowns, giving the Texans a real offensive identity for the first time in franchise history. The Colts and Ravens were still clinging to AFC supremacy, but the Steelers reminded everyone that they knew how to get it done in the playoffs. Big Ben returned from a 4-game suspension and led Pittsburgh back to the Super Bowl with a team that just refused to break. James Harrison and Troy Polamalu still led that defense. In the NFC, the Falcons were the 1 seed, the Saints were the defending champs, and the Eagles had Michael Vick back in full form, throwing bombs and rewriting his legacy after returning from prison. But it was the Packers, a 10-6 wildcard team that barely snuck into the playoffs, who caught fire. Rodgers, who hadn't won an MVP yet, played the best football of his life. He shredded the Eagles, lit up the Falcons, and survived a brutal NFC Championship game in Chicago, where Jay Cutler exited early and Caleb Haney nearly pulled off a miracle. And the Super Bowl was not quite a classic, but it was a good game. Rodgers and Roethlisberger certainly made for a spectacular showdown. The Steelers came back from a 21-3 hole, but Rodgers was just too precise. He finished with 304 yards, 3 touchdowns, and the Super Bowl MVP. The Packers were champions for the first time since Brett Favre's prime. The Jets' window slammed shut, and the Patriots, over a half-decade removed from their last Super Bowl victory, started getting labeled as a regular season team. But Rodgers became a made man, with the Packers looking like they might be the NFL's next dynasty. However, in 2011, it felt like every elite quarterback was throwing for 5,000 yards. Calvin Johnson was single-handedly taking over games and mossing triple coverages. Tim Tebow became the biggest superstar in the league. And if you're a Patriots fan, you might still have nightmares thinking about Mario Manningham. The lockout dominated the summer, and at first, it looked like there might not be football at all. But once the CBA got signed and the games finally started, it was business as usual, except for the fact that QBs were shredding defenses at will. Cam Newton had the best rookie quarterback season ever. Drew Brees threw for 5,476 yards. Tom Brady threw for 5,200. Stafford crossed 5,002. And Aaron Rodgers didn't hit that mark, but he had the best season of them all. 45 touchdowns, just 6 interceptions, a record 122.5 passer rating, and an MVP trophy to go with a 15-1 record for the Packers. Green Bay looked completely untouchable all year. But come playoff time, everyone started back at 0. And when the lights came on in January, the Packers folded. The Giants walked into Lambeau and knocked off the defending champs 37-20, just like they did 4 years earlier. The Giants snuck into the playoffs as a wild card once again and turned into a completely different team overnight. In the AFC, Tim Tebow stunned the football world in the wild card round, throwing an 80-yard touchdown to Demaryius Thomas on the first play of overtime to beat the Steelers, instantly becoming one of the most improbable playoff moments in NFL history. But ultimately, it came down to the Patriots and Ravens. Brady had weapons once again. Gronk had the best season ever by a tight end. Wes Welker was still Wes Welkering, and Belichick didn't have a little lady distracting him. But the Ravens almost had them. However, Lee Evans dropped the game winner, Billy Cundiff missed the gimme, and New England somehow survived. Then Super Bowl 46 was a rematch of Super Bowl 42, and it played out almost the exact same way too. The Patriots had the lead late in a low-scoring game, and the Giants needed a miracle. So Eli Manning dropped a perfect pass over 2 defenders down the sideline to Mario Manningham. It was their helmet catch 2.0. Then a few plays later, Ahmad Bradshaw accidentally scored, and the Patriots ran out of time, losing 21-17. The Giants proved again that once you're in, anything is possible. Eli Manning now had 2 rings, both over Tom Brady, and both in near identical fashion. The Patriots dynasty was in a serious drought. and New York fans had all the ammo they'd ever need in any Brady debate. But the 2012 season began in disastrous fashion, as the NFL had a lockout of their official referees, replacing them with unprepared off-brand officials who quickly became the laughingstock of America. The debacle peaked with the infamous Fail Mary on Monday Night Football, when a blown call handed the Seahawks a win over the Packers, and forced the league to bring the real referees back. And this season was historic for quarterbacks once again, but not the ones you'd expect. Not Brady, Manning, or Breeze. This was the year the new kids took over. Andrew Luck, Russell Wilson, and most of all, Robert Griffin III. RG3 was amazing, making the read option look revolutionary. And so began a serious shift toward mobile quarterbacks. This rookie class was insane. Andrew Luck took a 2-14 Colts team to the playoffs. Russell Wilson led Seattle to an 11-5 season, and RG3 ended the regular season on a 7-game win streak. But the young signal caller who made the biggest impact by season's end was not any of them. It was second-year backup turned starter Colin Kaepernick. Midway through the season, Alex Smith got hurt, prompting Kaepernick to step in and light it up. Jim Harbaugh kept rolling with him even once Smith got healthy, and the 49ers never looked back. His speed, arm, and command of the pistol offense, it was something no one in the league had ever really seen. And with a dominant defense led by Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, and Aldon Smith, San Francisco was suddenly the scariest team in the league. Calvin Johnson broke the single-season receiving record for the Lions, but in Minneapolis, Adrian Peterson was making everyone rethink whether or not he was actually human. Coming off a torn ACL and MCL, he ran for 2,097 yards, 8 yards shy of the all-time single-season record, and carried the Vikings to the playoffs. It was the greatest running back season in league history, and it earned him the MVP. Over in Denver, Peyton Manning was back, now in a Broncos jersey with a surgically repaired neck, but you wouldn't have been able to tell by watching him. The Broncos won 13 games and secured the 1 seed in the AFC, setting up what felt like the start of a new golden age in Denver. But in the playoffs, everything went sideways once again. The Texans started the year 11-1 and looked like Super Bowl contenders, thanks to J.J. Watt turning into perhaps the most destructive defensive player of the century to this point, but lost 3 of their last 4 and were routed in the divisional round. RG3's career was pretty much ended before it got off the ground as he tore his ACL in the wildcard round, and the Broncos got stunned by Joe Flacco, who launched the mile-high miracle past Raheem Moore to tie the game, leading to a Baltimore win in double overtime. And the Ravens went on a roll, crushing New England in the AFC title game and giving Ray Lewis a chance at a storybook send-off in his final playoff run. And Super Bowl 47 was the Harbaugh Bowl, between John and Jim. But after the Ravens got up 28-6 in the third quarter, the NFL rigged the lights to go out in the stadium to stall Baltimore's momentum, and the 49ers made a furious comeback. But Flacco and the Ravens were able to hold on 34-31. Giving Ray Lewis his second ring and fooling some into thinking Joe Flacco was an elite quarterback. However, despite the loss, Kaepernick was suddenly one of the league's most feared players. But in 2013, it was all about the noise in Seattle. It was the year where a second-year quarterback, a fifth-round corner, and a head coach most people had written off built the most terrifying defense in over a decade, and then trounced the greatest offense ever in the Super Bowl. This was one of the most exciting regular seasons of the decade as well, one that was packed with offense. Despite catching passes from 3 different quarterbacks, Josh Gordon led the league in receiving yards and posted back-to-back 200-yard games in one of the wildest receiver seasons ever. Peyton Manning, in his old age, threw for a record 5,477 yards and 55 touchdowns, won MVP, and made the Broncos look borderline unbeatable. He dismantled defenses, dropped 7 touchdowns in the season opener, and managed to feed double-digit scores to all of Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, Wes Welker, and Julius Thomas. Denver scored 606 points, the most ever in one season. Andy Reid took over a 2-14 Chiefs team, turned them into an 11-win playoff squad, with Jamal Charles racking up nearly 2,000 yards from scrimmage and 19 touchdowns. While Chip Kelly debuted with the Eagles and brought his up-tempo, college-style offense to the NFL, leading Philly to a division title. But up in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle was cooking up something just as scary. The Legion of Boom was their brand. Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, and Cam Chancellor patrolled the secondary. Bobby Wagner was in his second year, and Russell Wilson just kept winning. Seattle went 13-3, won the NFC, and hosted the NFC Championship game against the 49ers in what instantly became one of the most violent, emotional games of the decade. You remember, Colin Kaepernick driving, looking for Crabtree in the end zone. Sherman tips it for a pick and then spews a wrestling promo. Then came Super Bowl 48, the most hyped offense of all time versus one of the best defenses ever. And it was over immediately. Denver snapped the ball over Peyton's head for a safety to start the game, and it never got any better. Cam Chancellor laid the wood, Malcolm Smith had a pick six, Percy Harvin took the opening kick of the second half to the house, and the game ended up with a final score of 43-8. Seattle became the team of the NFL. They were young, loud, brash, but they had earned every right to talk. And Manning, after easily the best quarterback season ever, walked off the field humiliated. But in 2014, we all remember one play, one decision, and one moment. However, the year did have plenty else to offer. This was the most talent-rich season of the decade. Odell Beckham Jr. became a national superstar with one Sunday night catch. J.J. Watt almost won MVP as a defensive end. Tony Romo had the best year of his life. Antonio Brown and Julio Jones were going toe-to-toe as the most dominant receivers of the decade. And Tom Brady, who many thought was slowing down, once again found another gear. And the next era of the Patriots dynasty. The regular season was packed with storylines. Aaron Rodgers won MVP with 38 touchdowns and just 5 picks, leading the Packers to a 12-4 record and another NFC North title. DeMarco Murray led the league in rushing with nearly 1,850 yards. The Cowboys went 12-4 behind a monstrous offensive line and a revitalized Romo. Meanwhile, J.J. Watt was doing pretty much everything. Sacks, forced fumbles, defensive touchdowns, even catching touchdown passes as a tight end. But no story defined the season like the Seahawks. After crushing Denver the year before, Seattle started a little slow but finished strong. Their defense returned to form, Lynch kept trucking, and Russell Wilson made just enough plays to carry them through the NFC. And the NFC Championship was one of the wildest games of the decade. Green Bay dominated for 55 minutes, but then unraveled. A Seattle fake field goal touchdown, a botched onside kick recovery, leading to a Seahawks win in overtime. In the AFC, the Patriots were back. After a rough 2-2 start and people actually wondering if Brady was done, New England moved on to Cincinnati and torched the league the rest of the way with Gronk, Edelman, and a newly acquired Darrelle Revis. The AFC title game was a 45-7 blowout win for the Pats over the Colts, but the story of this game would ultimately become Deflategate, with allegations surfacing that the Patriots had tampered with football pressure. But again, they won by 38, so on to Super Bowl 49 they went. And that was a game that was close as could be. It was one of the best games in NFL history, a back-and-forth battle that ended in a way that no one could have ever imagined. Seattle drove the length of the field with a chance to win, second and goal from the 1, and instead of giving it to Marshawn Lynch, they called a slant that Malcolm Butler, an undrafted rookie, jumped and picked off to make it a 28-24 win for the Pats. Brady got his 4th ring and Pete Carroll got a lifetime of regret. Brady was back on top, but the Seahawks were gutted. That 1-yard decision haunted the franchise for years. It still does. And as for Deflategate, it would hang over the NFL for many months to come. 2014 was truly unforgettable. But if you remember 2015, you remember Cam Newton either making you love or hate the dab, the smile, and the Superman chest rip. You remember a quarterback who looked like he was having more fun than anyone else in the league. The league he was utterly dominating all by himself. The Panthers went 15-1 without their top receiver. But 2015 wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. It was also the beginning of the end for one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Peyton Manning was officially breaking down before our eyes. His arm was shot and his body was giving out. But back to Newton, he won MVP in a landslide, throwing for 35 touchdowns, rushing for 10 more, and he led a Panthers offense that didn't have a single elite wide receiver. Greg Olsen was his best weapon as Kelvin Benjamin tore his ACL in the preseason. Yet Cam didn't let that matter. Carolina's defense, led by Luke Kuechly, Josh Norman, and Thomas Davis, was just as good too, forcing turnovers, scoring touchdowns, and playing with the same emotion Cam brought to the offense. They steamrolled the NFC, dropping 49 on poor Arizona in the NFC Championship. The only bump in the road all year was a near upset to the Giants, where Odell Beckham Jr. and Josh Norman were just obsessed with each other the entire game. Meanwhile, in the AFC, the Broncos were winning, but in a much different way than they had in the years prior. Peyton Manning got benched, injured, and threw twice as many interceptions as touchdowns, and was frankly cooked. Brock Osweiler stepped in, but would eventually relinquish the job back to Peyton via injury. However, the real story was their generational defense. Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware, and an elite secondary coined the no-fly zone. In the AFC title game, it was Manning versus Brady for the 17th and final time. Denver won 20-18, stopping Brady on a 2-point try after a late touchdown. But given the diminished state of Peyton Manning, many were all but handing Cam Newton the Lombardi Trophy heading into Super Bowl 50. However, Denver's defense had other plans. Von Miller absolutely could not be stopped, forcing 2 fumbles, one of which was returned for a touchdown. Cam got sacked 6 times and never got in rhythm. He didn't dive for a loose ball after one of his fumbles in the 4th quarter, and people never let him forget it. The Panthers scored just 10 points. That dab disappeared, and Peyton Manning walked off into the sunset with his 2nd ring. Cam Newton was never quite the same. He'd have moments, but 2015 was by far his peak. Von Miller won Super Bowl MVP, and a truly dominant all-time defense took the crown for the 2nd time in the decade. But in 2016, you may recall one particular score associated with the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history, or one of the most unthinkable choke jobs, depending on your perspective, along with Colin Kaepernick sparking a national firestorm by kneeling during the national anthem to protest racial injustice. But believe it or not, there were other football games that took place in 2016. It was a season flush with exciting developments. The Cowboys became America's team once again thanks to 2 rookies, and even the Raiders were back. But the year started with Brady on the shelf, not for injury, but serving a 4-game suspension for allegedly playing a role in Deflategate. Jimmy Garoppolo started strong, got hurt, and then Jacoby Brissett stepped in. The Patriots went 3-1 without Brady, and when he returned, it was personal. He threw 28 touchdowns to just 2 picks over 12 games. New England went 14-2 and steamrolled into the playoffs. But Brady was not the MVP. That honor went to Matt Ryan, who finally put it all together in year 9. With Kyle Shanahan calling the plays, Ryan threw for nearly 5,000 yards and 38 touchdowns. Julio Jones was at the peak of his powers, and Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman made for an elite backfield committee. The Falcons led the league in scoring, dropped 34 points per game, and looked ready to finally win their first ring in franchise history. In Dallas, the Cowboys went from worst to first. Tony Romo got hurt in the preseason, and suddenly it was the Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott show. Dak, a 4th-round rookie, played like a 10-year vet, and Zeke led the league in rushing. The Cowboys went 13-3, won the NFC East, and had an offensive line equipped to dominate for years. That was until Aaron Rodgers cut their heart out in the divisional round with that sideline laser to Jared Cook. But the NFC Championship was a romp as Atlanta buried the Packers. And over in the AFC, the Patriots handled the Texans and then survived the Steelers to reach their 7th Super Bowl under Belichick and Brady. And Super Bowl 51 started like a dream for Atlanta. They led 28-3 midway through the 3rd quarter, then, as we all probably know, Dante Hightower strip sack, Pat's touchdown, Julio made the catch of the year, but Shanahan called a pass play on 3rd and short instead of running and kicking the game-sealing field goal, which then led to a hold, a sack, and a punt. Brady led scoring drive after scoring drive to end up with a 34-28 overtime win. The Patriots scored 31 unanswered points. Brady had his 5th ring, and the GOAT conversation was officially over. Kyle Shanahan moved on to San Francisco, and the Falcons' window slammed shut. Matt Ryan had won MVP, but it was meaningless after the way that season ended. But in 2017, a backup quarterback, who was the worst quarterback in the NFL 2 years earlier, outdueled the GOAT on the grandest stage. And Minneapolis got a miracle with a backup of their own. The script that Goodell and his boys cooked up got tossed in the garbage. Carson Wentz was supposed to win MVP, Deshaun Watson was supposed to take over, Aaron Rodgers was cooking, and then they all got hurt. It was the year of next man up. Carson Wentz was the story of the season. In just his 2nd year, he had the Eagles rolling. He threw 33 touchdowns in 13 games, was the runaway MVP favorite, and had Philly sitting at 11-2. Then, in Week 14, he tore his ACL diving into the end zone against the Rams. Just like that, Nick Foles entered the picture, and everyone suspected Philly's season was over. In Houston, a rookie Deshaun Watson was decimating the NFL, throwing 18 touchdowns from Week 3 to Week 8 before a torn ACL in practice ended what was going to be a season for the history books. In Green Bay, Anthony Barr shattered Aaron Rodgers' collarbone, and even in Seattle, the Legion of Boom succumbed to injury. But of course, Tom Brady stood tall. At 40 years old, he led the league in passing yards and won MVP once again. The Patriots went 13-3, making it look routine as they always did. The Vikings, with Case Keenum leading the charge following a Sam Bradford injury, went 13-3 as well. And the Rams, who went 4-12 in 2016, transformed instantly under new head coach Sean McVay. But no one could have predicted what happened in the playoffs. In the divisional round, the Minneapolis Miracle took place. With 10 seconds left, Case Keenum threw a prayer to Stephon Diggs, Marcus Williams whiffed on the tackle, and Diggs sprinted down the sideline for the game winner, advancing Minnesota to the NFC Championship, where the Eagles blew their doors off. Foles threw for 352 yards and 3 touchdowns, and at that point, it should have been obvious how for real this team was. In the AFC, Blake Bortles and the Jaguars rode a dominant defense and a shockingly effective playoff run all the way to the conference championship, but ultimately fell to New England. Super Bowl 52 was a shootout for the ages. Brady threw for 505 yards. The Patriots didn't punt once, and still lost. The Eagles pulled out every trick, including the Philly special, a gutsy 4th down touchdown pass to Foles before halftime. The game came down to one final stop, where Brandon Graham strip-sacked Brady, and that just about did it. Tom Brady was brilliant, but Foles became a Philly legend, winning Super Bowl MVP. Doug Peterson outcoached Belichick, and the Eagles had their first Lombardi Trophy in franchise history. But Carson Wentz was never the same. However, in 2018, we got fireworks the likes of which we hadn't seen since 2013, as well as Tom Brady's greatest challenger since Peyton Manning. It was a year headlined by Patrick Mahomes and the Los Angeles Rams. In his first year as the starter, Mahomes won MVP, playing quarterback in a way we had never seen. He threw for 5,097 yards and 50 touchdowns with throws across his body, no-look passes, and left-handed flicks. He turned every Chiefs game into a can't-miss event. Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill were in their absolute primes. And no disrespect to Alex Smith, but Andy Reid finally had a quarterback who could execute any play in his book. The Chiefs finished 12-4, with one of the losses coming in a 54-51 war against the Rams, where Goff and Mahomes traded blows all night, a game that is considered by many to be the greatest regular season bout of all time. But Kansas City locked up the 1 seed nonetheless. Le'Veon Bell sat out the entire 2018 season in a contract dispute, ending his time with the Steelers. And after missing all of 2017, Andrew Luck returned triumphantly, throwing for 39 touchdowns and leading the Colts back to the playoffs. However, the AFC still belonged to Tom Brady. The Patriots, despite some regular season turbulence, won 11 games, got the 2 seed, and turned into a machine in January per usual. Over in the NFC, the Bears acquired Khalil Mack from the Raiders, and he immediately transformed their defense, helping them win the NFC North. While the Saints were dominant, Drew Brees was the MVP runner-up, Michael Thomas caught every quick slant in sight, Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram were a 2-headed monster, leading New Orleans to the number 1 seed. And the Rams matched their 13-3 record. Sean McVay's offense was humming with Goff and Todd Gurley, but Wade Phillips also had a defense led by Aaron Donald, who won Defensive Player of the Year for the 2nd year in a row. The NFC Championship game was a classic that became forever tarnished at the end. With under 2 minutes left, the Rams committed a blatant pass interference but did not receive a flag. The Saints had to settle for a field goal. The Rams tied it and then won in overtime. In the AFC, the Patriots and Chiefs went back and forth in a frigid Arrowhead. Mahomes was brilliant, but it wasn't enough to overcome Dee Ford's boneheaded offsides penalty that cost Kansas City a game-sealing pick. It ended in a 37-31 overtime Pats win. Then came Super Bowl 53. And after a year of offensive explosions, it was an ugly one. Belichick's defense choked the life out of McVay's Rams to win 13-3, the lowest scoring Super Bowl of all time. Julian Edelman won MVP almost by default, Brady got ring number 6, and Sean McVay got a harsh lesson in postseason football from Bill Belichick. Patrick Mahomes was clearly the future, but Brady was still the best there was. But in 2019, the greatest running quarterback in NFL history burst onto the scene. Antonio Brown melted down after a trade to Oakland, ended up getting released, and then had 1 game with the Patriots before again getting cut. Ryan Tannehill, of all people, beat Tom Brady in the playoffs. Michael Thomas broke the NFL record with 149 catches. Christian McCaffrey had a historic season, catching 116 passes and totaling nearly 2,400 yards from scrimmage. And Jimmy G led a stacked 49ers team. Not only was 2019 the end of this decade, but it also coincided with the end of the best quarterback generation. Brady was fading, or at least people thought he was this year. Drew Brees was on his last leg, Eli was on his way out, as was Phillip Rivers, and a new wave of young signal callers was invading the NFL. No one expected Lamar Jackson to be like this. Sure, people thought he fell too far in the draft, and he'd been fun in 2018 after he supplanted Joe Flacco. But in 2019, he became a truly one-of-a-kind quarterback. He led the league in touchdown passes with 36, while placing 6th in rushing with over 1,200 yards. The Ravens retooled their offense around him, and it worked beautifully. Baltimore finished 14-2, secured the number 1 seed, and Lamar joined Brady as the second ever unanimous MVP. But as we've become all too accustomed to with Lamar, in the divisional round, the 9-7 Titans stomped Baltimore behind Derrick Henry's 195 yards, mercilessly ending the Ravens' dominant season. And then they waltzed into Foxborough and ended Tom Brady's year as well. Over in the NFC, Jameis Winston became the first quarterback to ever throw 30 touchdowns and 30 picks in the same season, delivering pure comedy every week. But more importantly, the 49ers were back. After just having selected Nick Bosa with the number 2 overall pick, Kyle Shanahan was operating the best all-around team in the NFL. They literally ran through the playoffs, including a blowout win over the Packers where Jimmy G only threw 8 passes, as Raheem Mostert ran free for 220 yards and 4 scores. But the real story was Kansas City. After falling short in 2018, Mahomes came back with the chip on his shoulder that he needed. The Chiefs' playoff run became legend. Down 24-0 to Houston? Not a problem. They scored 51. Down 17-7 to Tennessee? That didn't matter either. On to Super Bowl 54 they went. And the 49ers had Mahomes on the ropes once again. Down 20-10 in the fourth quarter, it was looking bleak for the Chiefs. Until a 44-yard bomb to Tyreek on 3rd and 15 led to 3 touchdowns in 5 minutes. Garoppolo had a chance to take the game back with a minute and a half left, but infamously overthrew what would have been a 49-yard Emmanuel Sanders touchdown, and the Chiefs won 31-20, with Mahomes earning Super Bowl MVP and Andy Reid finally taking home the championship that had eluded him for 2 decades. In the aftermath, Brady finally left New England for the Sunshine State, and Mahomes was the new face of the NFL, and the Chiefs officially kicked off the next great NFL dynasty. 2019 ended the decade with one era of quarterbacks dying out and another being born. Thank you for watching, and if you like this video, I think you'll like this one too.